I just noticed that I spilled coffee on my NovaBlast 2. Sounds about right. The ASICS NovaBlast #1 was at the top of so many people's lists as the top shoe of 2020, but it definitely had its weak points. For me specifically, the foam was just a little bit too squishy, I couldn't get a good lockdown in the midfoot, the toe box was extremely wide, it just didn't fit great. But has ASICS figured it out in the version 2 of the NovaBlast? Let's find out. So quick disclosures, I did buy this shoe with my own cold hard-earned Canadian Monopoly money. I've done about 4 runs in this shoe so far, totaling about 21 kilometers or 13 miles. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is Brendon and I am a non-elite runner who loves to talk about running shoes and running content in general. So if that's something you enjoy, considering that subscribe button right down below helps out the channel a ton. And if you do find this video entertaining, useful, or whatever, hit the like button. It really does help this video get out to more people. Now, here's the stats. So the NovaBlast version 2 is one of those shoes that has different stats for men's and women's. So starting with the men's, we have 30 millimeters of stack height in the heel, 22 in the forefoot for an 8 millimeter drop. For the women's, you're coming in at 29 millimeters in the heel, 21 in the forefoot for that same 8 millimeter drop, but I guess that 1 millimeter stack height makes a difference. Don't really know how, but sure. The weight of this shoe is 9.7 ounces for a men's size 9 or 7.3 ounces for a women's size 8, I think the sample size is. If I'm wrong about that, someone please correct me in the comment section down below. And this shoe is true to size with a little bit of a caveat that toe box room is just a little bit too wide still, but they've definitely improved on that, but we'll touch on that in the upper section. The upper on the NovaBlast #2 is a double engineered jacquard mesh, and they've done quite a few improvements compared to the version 1. One of the biggest things for me is the heel stabilizer and the gusseted tongue. The heel stabilizer in particular is because, like I mentioned, in the version 1, my ankles were rolling all over the place, and I was getting quite a bit of knee pain, and it wasn't a comfortable ride. However, with the heel stabilizer and some changes they've made to the structure of the midsole that we'll get into, it's really made the shoe much more stable. My heel and ankle lockdown is so much better than compared to the version 1. Another thing helping with that lockdown is that half gusseted tongue. You guys know I love a gusseted tongue. And what a gusseted tongue really helps do is help that midfoot lockdown. It allows your foot to just really get in there and stay locked in place. Like I alluded to in the stats section, the toe box in this shoe is just a little bit voluminous. It's nothing like you're gonna get in the version 1. So if that didn't bother you there, it's definitely not gonna bother you here. It's definitely a bit more of a snug foot in the toe box. This shoe does run a little bit long, but for me, I have just about a thumb width, and I went my normal size 10.5 US men's. Oh, and they've also added a pull tab, but I did notice that some colorways don't have the pull tab, which is kind of interesting. Doesn't really make a difference for me. I never use pull tabs. Sorry if you hate me for that, I just don't use pull tabs. I've been running in relatively humid and hot conditions. It's now middle of July in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we are surrounded by water, so the humidity is regularly getting up to 100%. And when I'm running in the ASICS NovaBlast #2, I don't find it too hot. I have heard some people say this shoe runs a little hot. For me, I haven't found that yet, but maybe as I do longer miles, I'll notice it a bit more. I will say though, at the end of my runs, like the padding around the ankle collar definitely does get a little damp, but pretty much as soon as I walk outside these days, I get damp, so I'm not surprised. They've also changed the laces on the NovaBlast version 2, which is a fantastic thing because the laces on the NovaBlast version 1 were kind of like guitar strings when you pulled it up and did not feel great on the top of your foot. The laces they have on this shoe definitely improved. They've also changed the padding on the tongue just slightly, not a whole lot, but just slightly, and just enough that when it lays on my foot, it feels absolutely fantastic. And that brings me to my next point, is the upper on the shoe isn't overly padded, which is a fantastic thing. I'm not someone that really needs a very padded shoe, so I like the amount of padding they have in the NovaBlast version 2. My runs in this shoe have made it very apparent that the changes they've made to the upper have drastically improved the ride of this shoe for me personally. One of the big things, like I said, was the stability of the initial shoe, but this next iteration is so much more stable, and I really do attribute it to the better lockdown, the addition of the heel stabilizer, the gusseted tongue, and the snugger foot through the forefoot and toe box. It's definitely improved the ride of the shoe quite drastically in my opinion. The upper on the NovaBlast 2 is set it and forget it. So I lace it up when I leave the house, and I don't have to think about it till I get back from the house. The only time I thought about it when I was out there on the run is when I was intentionally trying to feel how the lockdown felt, and when I thought about that, it felt great. So overall, really enjoying the upper updates on the NovaBlast 2. The Flyflown Blast midsole is light, responsive, and very squishy is the best way that I could describe this midsole. Now, it definitely doesn't feel as squishy as it did in the version 1. What they've done here is changed kind of like the sculpting of the midsole, kind of the shape of it in general, and actually they've even changed the drop of this shoe, and I think that has made a drastic improvement as well. So they've gone from a 10mm drop in the version 1 to an 8mm drop in the version 2, and I found the 10mm drop in the version 1 made me really feel like I was kind of on a platform leaning forward. It didn't make it enjoyable for my daily training runs. That's just how I felt. In addition to the instability, that just wasn't a great daily trainer for me. However, with the 8mm drop and the changes they've made to the sculpting and the changes they've made to the upper, the ride of this midsole has been drastically improved in my opinion. It doesn't feel as squishy underfoot as the version 1, so if you like the squishiness of the version 1, you might be slightly disappointed, but I don't think that that's a bad thing for the majority of runners. The Flyflown Blast midsole foam is somewhat of a masterpiece. Think Mona Lisa, but on a running shoe. This foam is fairly squishy but bounces back very quickly, making the shoe feel quite snappy underfoot. It doesn't really feel like you're losing much to midsole compression, which is fantastic. And after running in this shoe, my legs just don't feel as beat up as they would in something like the Pegasus 38, for example, which I find to be much more firm with that React midsole foam. The ride of this midsole foam can only be described as fun, sassy, and outrageous. No, but really this midsole feels so smooth underfoot and doesn't have any trouble when you want to pick up the pace. It makes running a Flyflown blast. I personally feel that the midsole feels quite a bit different in the version 2 compared to the version 1, but for me, a non-elite, normal, everyday runner, it has only been good. The changes that they've made has made this shoe much more accessible for me, and I think it'll make it much more accessible for the everyday runner as well. Now, let's get into the outsole, because they've made some changes there too. Now, the outsole on this shoe, they have a decouple groove, and what a decouple groove is kind of like the cut-in that you see here, and goes around and extends to the forefoot. And on the forefoot, they also have like a protruding piece. That actually is quite noticeable when you're running along as well, and we'll get into that in 1 second here. The decouple groove is supposed to feel like a trampoline, they say. And sure, it does definitely feel like you get a little bit of energy back, and I think it might be because when you're compressing this outsole, it expands outward and then compresses back very quickly inward, kind of does feel like a trampoline, I guess. That's the best way I could also describe it. Hate using that word in terms of running shoes, but they did it, so I'll copy their words. Now, this protrusion in the forefoot here does feel very noticeable when you're running along. It feels like you're getting a nice, like, stiff toe off almost. Kind of like what you're getting in the airbag and the Pegasus 38, but just a different, less jarring feeling, I would say. The Pegasus 38 airbag feels more jarring and apparent. This just feels more subtle and nice. They also have AHAR rubber on the outsole, and AHAR rubber, it's gonna last. AHAR is ASICS high abrasion rubber, and they've used this outsole on so many other shoes. I have it on pretty much every one of my ASICS shoes, and no wear has ever really happened with it. The outsole, I think they've done a great job. I did notice a little bit of like scuffing and stuff towards the forefoot, but that's to be expected. It's a running shoe. It's gonna get scuffed up. That's fine. Guys, wear your running shoes out. They're a tool. They're meant to do a job. Now, in terms of value, this shoe can be used for a lot of different things. Now, I'm gonna say it doesn't feel fantastic for going at those higher speeds, but it doesn't feel bad. I was able to pick up the pace and not really think about it. I used to pick up the pace in Brooks Adrenaline GTS shoes. Those are very built-up stability shoes, so it doesn't really matter the weight of the shoe to me. I don't care that it's a little bit heavier. I can pick up the pace and feel just fine. If you can only buy one shoe, this can do the job of your faster day stuff. It can do the job of the daily training runs, which I am looking forward to using this shoe the most in, and it could even do your easy day stuff. They fixed the instability that I got in the version 1, and that was one of the main reasons why I didn't like using it for my easy training, because landing more on the heel, I literally just collapsed over. On this one, I'm not getting anything near that bad. So overall, value of this shoe, they've also dropped the price here in Canada, which I forgot to mention. It's 180 Canadian dollars compared to 190 Canadian dollars for the version 1. In the US, I think it stayed at that $130 price point, but it's still a great value in my opinion. Overall, this shoe has quickly become one of the contenders for my favorite shoe of 2021. We still have a lot of testing to do. The lockdown of the upper, the ride of the midsole, the squishiness, the response, the nice drop and curvature, and the outsole, which I guess they call trampoline, but for me it just feels nice. All this makes for a very, very nice package for a reasonable price. Still expensive, but a reasonable price. I'm very much looking forward to putting more and more miles into this. If you've tried the ASICS NovaBlast and you haven't tried the NovaBlast version 2 and you're considering picking it up, I would say it's definitely worth the upgrade. They've done quite a few improvements and they're all, in my opinion, for the better. They've increased the weight slightly, but what you're gonna get in the increase of weight, you're also gonna make up for in the overall comfort of the shoe. So folks, have you tried the NovaBlast version 2? What are your thoughts so far? I'd love to hear what other people are feeling about this shoe. I have watched a couple videos where people just didn't seem too over enthused about it, but for me, I'm over the moon for it. Thank you all so much for making it to the end of this video. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We're almost to 3,000 subscribers, which is so insane to think about. Thank you all so much for the continued support. And you know what? I'm just gonna do it. Please share this video with your running friends. Thank you so much. I will catch you on the next one.